Hello and welcome to episode 274 of the Thursday Night Podcast. Our quickest probably turnaround time ever between main pods because, schedule dictates we're right back on schedule. It's basically already Monday of a game week, or
pretty
Tuesday of a game week, I think.
Pretty much.
Team will be back in action on Thursday for the football after 41-24 loss to Georgia Southern. Saturday night, they'll play South Alabama on Thursday. We'll hit it all. This is like post-game show timing, but regular show vibes. We'll run through last game, preview the game with the Jaguars coming up, hit our pick 'em at the end. But Georgia Southern 41, Georgia State 24. A score that definitely doesn't dictate the flow of the game, but Georgia State not playing well down the stretch had a lot to do with that. Georgia State leads by 4 at the end of each of the first three quarters. They're up 7-3, then they're up 17-13 at halftime, then they are up 24-20 at the end of the third quarter. But Georgia Southern outscores Georgia State 21-0 in the final 15 minutes. The only turnover of the game is a Lane Wadle fumble in the fourth quarter, with Georgia State driving to try and retake the lead down 27-24. Georgia Southern scores a touchdown on that drive. Drive is extended by a face mask penalty on Jartavius Flournoy. And the next play is the touchdown. Georgia State goes 3-and-out for the first time in the game at the worst time possible. Down 34-24, give the ball back. Georgia Southern returns the punt out to the 50 and just kind of sits on the Panthers defensively, leans on them, drains the clock. Dalen Cobb gets a short rushing touchdown with 4:33 to go, and a final drive to try and save face and drop 30 points on an FBS opponent for the first time. Falls just short of the goal line. Incomplete pass on 4th and goal intended for Kieran Milton. Incomplete. Game over. No positives to be gleaned at the end of what ultimately it was, I think, the best performance that Georgia State had given, especially offensively, against non-FCS competition this year. And you could even make the argument that it was better than the Murray State performance, just if you're grading on the curve of who you're playing. But running through the final stats, as I pulled these up for the YouTube viewers, Georgia State outgains Georgia Southern 444-420, 280 through the air, 164 on the ground, 120 of those coming from quarterback Cameron Brown. Talk about that, obviously, as we go through this. Very balanced from Georgia Southern, 212 passing yards and 208 on the ground. The next stat is kind of the story of the season, the story of the game, the story of the team. Georgia State, 15 penalties, 120 yards. Georgia Southern, just 4 penalties for 43 yards. Both offenses incredibly efficient on third down. Georgia State was 10 of 14, while Georgia Southern was even better at 9 of 12. Quarterback seems like it's now settled. Feels like, I don't know if they listened to the pod. It was pretty quick turnaround to listen to that pod and made a decision based on it. So I'm going to assume they made it in-house before listening to us. But we basically made the case on this last episode of this is why you need to go with Cameron Brown. And that's what happened. Cameron Brown started for the first time, which felt to me like an indication that he might just get the reins, because even when he had played, he had always come in after the second series, and this one he's starting out. He's 29 of 38, 280 passing yards with a touchdown, no interceptions. As I mentioned, he leads the team with 120 rushing yards, 8 yards an attempt, and a long of 15, so it was really just like decent chunks the whole time. Receiving core spreads the love around. Javon Robinson leads the way with 7 catches, 71 yards. Ted Hurst, 5 for 68 with the touchdown, and the sequence there in the second quarter right before the half where he mosses a DB back-to-back plays for a 22-yard catch down inside the 1, and then a play later does the same thing for a touchdown catch. And then Leo Blackburn, who battled through bloody nose, 3 catches, 32 yards, 2 of those moving the chains on some pivotal third downs. I guess start here. They kind of figured it out on offense, and there's caveats that this is the worst defense they've faced so far. And probably there was always going to be a bit of a advantage to be gained the first time they did just commit to a quarterback, because we have to assume Georgia Southern spent any time this week prepping for the TJ Finley stuff, and they didn't see any of it. But like, this is kind of what we expected, that he could handle the deep throws pretty well, and the intermediate stuff, and he had that working. He missed one throw that really I can think of that really counted. It would have been a touchdown to THERSday that ended up resulting in a field goal for Georgia State instead. But like, Cameron Brown looked the part of the starting quarterback, and especially when he went as crazy as he did on the ground, it really begs the question of like why this didn't happen sooner. Because it's like, theoretically, it was always likely he could help out in that way, but to have it so starkly happen the first time he just gets control of the offense really paints a dim picture of how the situation was handled to date.
Yeah, in a way, they kind of backwards into some frustration here. I thought Brown looked really good. Obviously the result of the game didn't go how Georgia State would have wanted. But he just looked so much more comfortable. They scored on 4 of their 7 drives. And I think that they would have scored I think they were going to score on the drive with the fumble. Obviously, it was just a pretty poor drive. They moved the ball exceptionally well.
The 3 and out was the only drive they didn't move the ball, because there was the fumble. I don't know, does one of the drives count as the one? I guess they didn't get it at the end of the first half, but I'm trying to think on the fly what the other one they wouldn't have scored on was. But the last one, I guess with the defense, we can get into that in general, but like, that last drive they almost scored on could have been to cut it to 1 score if you just get 1 field goal instead of a touchdown here or there, but digression.
Yeah, I mean, it's frustrating because, coming into this game, you and I were expecting, a step back from the defense, but I don't know that we expected this level of step back. It's just not, it hasn't been good the last 2 weeks. And I think it was solid for 3 quarters. I mean, yeah, Georgia Southern put up points, but, it at least felt like they were capable of matching them. And then just the wheels fell off. And, with the fumble on offense, they gave Georgia Southern's offense another possession. And it's just, at that point in time, the defense wasn't capable of stopping them.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into the philosophical disagreement, because I kind of said this is what they needed to do, so I'd be kind of a hypocrite if I suddenly was like, what the hell were they doing? They were blitzing a lot, and I think they looked at it and saying, we're not going to get beat deep by these receivers. We're not going to let Camden Brown go off on us. And he had 2 touchdowns, 3 catches, 48 yards. I think they kind of achieved that. They gave up some big pass plays, and they gave up some chunks on the ground, but what had happened was it was screen plays where they didn't get to the running back and let him break loose. It was J.C. French obviously he led the team with 85 rushing yards. It felt like they were more comfortable letting that be what they have to, they could have gotten rallied to him quicker in those moments, but they were always going to commit their attention down the field, the passing game. And the 40-yarder from O.J. Arnold, which was the longest play from scrimmage for Georgia Southern, was on a swing pass into a blitz that he was not pushed out of bounds by D.I.C. Hopkins, and so he just kept going. He also had another 35-yarder. It was kind of the similar vein. But once they got close to the, in the red area, close to the end zone, it was just, we can throw a jump ball up to Camden Brown. And on both of those touchdowns, I will note, he was on nickel. It was DeMonte Gaston on the first one. It was Sam McCall on the second one. And so when they couldn't match personnel as well, and when they moved Camden Brown into the slot and he got more favorable matchups, he got his. And when you're that close to the end zone, you can't really prevent them from going after their big targets. That's what they're going to do close to the end zones. And it's what Georgia State did, and spammed the THERSday button when they got close to the end zone themselves. But I can't really fault the game plan necessarily. The execution wasn't there, and I guess the part of it I can say is there were times where Georgia Southern clearly had a good idea of what the defensive play call was going to be. I mentioned that 40-yarder to Arnold. It was the perfectly dialed call against that blitz. So if it's a matter of not disguising it well enough or being too obvious on what you're showing on tape to have them ready for that look, that's certainly the part that you can criticize. And just in general, another game without a turnover. No sacks, though didn't give up any sacks either. Just kind of a wash all the way around there. Both of these bad pass rushes continue to be as such, but in that fourth quarter, after the turnover happens, the defense needed to be the one to step up and get a stop, get another turnover back, and they weren't able to do it. And then 34-24, the 3-and-out. Yes, they're starting at midfield. They're put in a bad position by the offense, but if you just hold them to a field goal there, that last drive could have been for something. Georgia State's turnover on downs happened with 50-ish seconds left in the game. If they get a touchdown there, they could have an onside in a 37-31 game where if they recover it, the odds aren't zero of winning that game. But because you can't get that stop there, once it was 41-24 with 4.5 left, it's all right, if you didn't already think so, this one's over. And so the defense just incapable of getting those stops. And the offense just not making plays happen in the fourth quarter either. It was a total collapse in the final 15 minutes. And, it's just not going to win you football games. It's when you got to play at your best. Can't be when you play at your worst.
Yeah, and they definitely did play at their worst. Through 3 quarters, I really thought that things were looking good too. I wouldn't necessarily say that Georgia State was guaranteed to win the game at that point in time, but I thought that they had a really good chance, and then just it all came undone in the fourth quarter, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they had moments when they go up 17-10 in the final minute of the first half. They still hold them to a field goal at the end of the half, but with 50 or so seconds in the second quarter to go, letting them get points at the end when you were getting the ball at a half, it cost you something. They grabbed some momentum there into the break. Come out in the third quarter, get the ball, because Georgia State won and deferred the decision to the second half at the beginning of the game. It's 4th and 1 at your own 43. Go for it. Don't hate the decision. It's a pass to Ted Hurst in the flat. Also, it speaks to the indictment of you can't trust your running game to get 1 yard. That's the decision. But given the realities with this team, can't really fault that. But it's shallow enough of a route that Ted Hurst does not get ruled to be there. Doesn't get the first down. Georgia Southern takes over and scores to take the lead. And so as we're looking at the moments when Georgia State could have grabbed this game in the way that Georgia Southern did when they got those chances in the fourth quarter, they let them go slipping. They score to go up 24-13 out of the break, even after giving up that field goal that kind of a bummer to give up at the end of the half. Georgia Southern might start pressing. And I guess it speaks to just a general emblematic thing with this team, and it's why they are now 1-6, is they have not put, outside of Murray State, they have not really put a single opponent under strain. I talked about it in the JMU game, that they were up in that game, but they never pushed it to a 2-score game. They never got James Madison really backs against the wall. In this game, they were always in it for the first 3 quarters. They never pressed it. They never got up big. They never made it to where a fan base that frankly is ready to turn on Clay Helton in a major way, this win does not mean that Georgia Southern feels all that hunky-dory about where the program is at, but they're just happy to get the rivalry win. That stadium, which ended up being a force for good in them in this game, could have gotten real nervous energy, could have gotten the boo birds out, but they were never forced to that level of discontent because it always was kind of back and forth, and Georgia State had opportunity to make it not that type of back and forth game. And this has not been a team that's been capable of, through 2 years, or 1 year and 7 games under Del McGee. The one time they kind of did that was the Texas State game and the Vanderbilt game last year, but they let those leads slip and ended up being kind of a hold on for dear life situation in both of those anyway. So it's this team isn't really great at mounting comebacks. This team is not really great at playing with a lead. What do you say you do here is kind of the operative question. It's kind of does not seem like a team that's been well enough prepared. And look, mention the little snafus, Lane Waddle didn't want to fumble. It's not why they lost the game. Played a factor because of the way the game script went, but that's not why you lost the game. Jartavius Flanoy on the next drive is is the guy who commits the face mask. That it would have been the end of a drive. It would have been a field goal attempt, probably a field goal attempt, maybe a punt, maybe a fourth down go decision, but it would have been like 4th and 6 or so. So it would have been a tough one. Extends the drive. The next play is a touchdown pass. Those guys are young guys. Those guys are going to make mistakes. Those guys are going to grow from mistakes. Question is now, 19 games into Del McGee's tenure, it's like, why does the team as a whole look the same? Why do the coaching decisions look the same? You expect the freshmen to make mistakes that might cost you in games, but that's part and parcel of playing those guys. It's not feeling like the coaching staff and the coaching decisions are showing that level of growth. Because you knew when you hired him, it was not going to be a slam dunk, ready day one type deal. He hadn't been a coordinator. He hadn't been a head coach before. You were banking on potential, and you were banking on him growing into the job. And there's not a lot of evidence that that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, to echo something that you said at the top of the broadcast here, why did it take so long to pick a quarterback? And despite the game being how it was and the fourth quarter going how it did, this is the best the offense has looked against an FBS opponent in over a year. It looked so much more put together, but then it still had some of that flavor of some of those end of 2024 season losses where they just were in the game and then just something dumb kind of kicks them out, or there's penalties, or there's just a turnover and, the defense not getting its own turnover. And it's just all this stuff just adds up and compounds. So even if you want to take away from this game that, hey, the offense, finally looks good and the running game looks good in any capacity, you still can't take too much from it because at the end of the day, the entire product still isn't where it needs to be.
Yeah, and I mean, to the run game, it really was the Cam Brown show in that regard because he hits 120 of the 164. Rashad Amos, 9 carries, 29 yards, and he gets the other rushing touchdown. Cam had one as well. DJ Murray had a couple nice carries, had a 9-yarder, ends up with 14 yards, 4.7 yards carry, but they're still not getting anything from the downhill running game. And they're trying different looks still, like they're mixing it up, and it just... The reason it made sense to go to Brown is kind of putting any kind of semblance of it together. But it's still kind of like he gets his touchdown on kind of a Darren Granger-esque empty set designed run, and that works. And there were a couple other times they went to that to move the chains. But they're relying on him and his athleticism more than there were times when Darren Granger, who is athletic, had big runs because it was schemed up really well and blocked up really well, and it's still not been the case on a down-to-down basis for this team. And so, it was better, but this is one of the worst defenses in the country, in the Sun Belt, and they specifically have been the worst at giving up rushing yardage. And so, it's kind of the same thing with Murray State, where, it was better, but this still wasn't as good as the 191 you put up against Ole Miss. And a lot of it was from your quarterback. It wasn't from just kind of you're able to run your stuff. So, better, but by what level? Does this mean I think they're going to go into the rest of the season and be able to just get 164 games the rest of the way? I'd have to see that first. No, I don't necessarily know that because there's a lot of caveats with the way this performance went and who you were playing and where they struggled to where it's I don't know how replicable this is. And certainly you want to win games where you run for 120 with your quarterback. He gives you 76% completion percentage and nearly 300 yards through the air. Not only do you want to score more than 24 points when that happens, you want to win that football game because you can't bank on that week to week. That is, top tier outcome from your offense.
Yeah, I mean, they definitely still have things to work on. I will say, I know that they need to improve the actual running back room, that operation of the running game. I feel like if Brown is taking a majority of the carries and being able to move that well, that's fine. It certainly could be worse. I mean, French was very good and opportunistic with his runs as well, which I think that was the difference maker, honestly. I mean, the reason the fourth quarter went the way that it did is just because French kind of tapped into what he did last year, didn't put the ball in harm's way, kept it on the ground, efficiently, outside of the slide where he let go of the ball, but obviously that was ruled down by contact anyways. It's okay if Brown is going to end up being the main driver of the running game. It just still puts you in a position where you're kind of one-dimensional if teams know they don't have to really count on the running backs to be anything other than blockers.
And yeah, I've said some version of this on air, off air, like, so I might be repeating myself, but you look at it and it's like, okay, offense looks better, but I still feel like you're not looking at this as like, we want to run it back with the Hugh Jackson experience. Obviously, from now on, you kind of hope you can keep Cameron Brown happy, and especially with another year, like if you can get him as your starter in 2026, that's a good starting point. And someone mentioned this on the boards today. This team has been better. I mean, probably this is true of every team, but it's certainly been the case for Georgia State that this team has been better when they know who their quarterback is in May. And when they've had the questions and when they've been replacing guys, that's the years that they've had some transition, had some struggles. So if you can go into next season knowing he's your quarterback and if he's going to be happy and want to stay here now that he's going to get the reins, that's positive. But I still think, especially with what we're talking about with not being able to establish any type of run game, you look at it and go, okay, maybe you switch the play caller up, maybe you bring in someone with a new philosophy there. And I've been a defender of the defense. I think that they've been better than their numbers, but I think they were as bad as their numbers were in this game. They deserved to give up 41 points. They couldn't get stops. You look at it and go, okay, maybe this isn't going to work with Travis Pearson as coordinator. Maybe he wants to bring pressure, but he doesn't know how to get home on the quarterback, and so that leaves them exposed in the run game, giving up yak, whatever you want to say. But then at that point, if you're talking about now for the second straight offseason replacing both of your coordinators, then, like, what are we doing here? Like, you can't just keep firing your coordinators and acting as if that was the issue. Because it's something more central to this team's identity or lack thereof that's causing the issues. And you could rearrange the deck chairs and bring in someone else and, after Jim Chaney and Hugh Jackson, bring in another experienced name, someone people have heard of. Maybe you've called an SEC defense or an SEC offense before, but it doesn't really feel like that's the issue. It just feels like the plan isn't there. What you're telling the kids to get them to go out and execute, because they're out there trying hard, isn't there. Don't put this on the players. Like, I don't think that they are out there, giving half effort. I think they're going out trying their damnedest. It just isn't resulting in winning football because of how they're being set up to succeed or not set up to succeed. So they're 1-6. They lose 3 straight now in this series, and so the all-time State Southern record is 6-6. They have lost the advantage they had built up there. That felt like the one thing over the last decade that really was especially 3 years ago. There's like, yeah, this team hasn't won the Sun Belt. This team hasn't done this or that, but they've owned the series that nobody gave them a chance to hang in, and they've given that up. They've lost 3 straight. Losing record now at Paulson, tied overall.
All 17-point losses, too.
Yeah, the last 3 have all been 17-pointers.
None of these games have been close.
So they move forward, and they don't have much time to think about all of this. Even then, everyone says on the Sunday after a game, it's like, we're flushing, we're on to the next one. But literally, Georgia State has to be on to the next one now because they play on Thursday. And it's going to be a loser doesn't make a bowl game as 1-6 South Alabama comes to Center Park Stadium to play 1-6 Georgia State. The Jaguars, you look at the numbers, and it's certainly they feel like a more hard done by 1-6 team as they're giving up 29 points a game and scoring 23.5 as a team. They've got 2-point loss to Tulane at home in the second week of the season. They lost 31-15 at Auburn. Lost by 14 to a good G5 team in North Texas. Only lost by 7 at Troy. And lost by 1 this past Tuesday, 15-14 at home to Arkansas State. And it just frankly, not a good, well-executed football game on anyone's part in that one. But sort of, I guess, you get what you pay for in a Tuesday night football game. So it will not be a short week for them. They will have had extra time to get ready for this one. Not sure if it'll make a difference or not, but Major Applewhite is there. He's in his second season after taking over when Kane Womack left to become the defensive play caller at Alabama. Seems like a program maybe in a similar spot with Georgia State where results aren't going your way, but they probably have a little more to hang their hat on, but it's really going to matter just like who wants this one more. Like, there is a chance one of these teams just comes in flat, unprepared, unwilling to want to play hard in this game just because of the way the season's gone. And, like, Del McGee has to make sure that that's not his team. Because, look, they have to win all 5 of their games left to make a bowl. Highly unlikely that's going to happen, let alone win 2 of them. But every week from this point on for him is about showing that he can take this program to a better place moving forward. And that starts now with, I mean, it's a winnable game. I don't know what the line's going to be at. The
6.5.
Oh, it's already out?
Yes, Georgia State is a 6.5 point dog.
Jesus.
At home to a team with 1 win.
Yeah, and again, neither of these teams have an FBS win. The only win the Jaguars have is also, it was about the same scores, like 38-21 against Morgan State in week 1. So, on paper, a lot of the same traits between these teams, and yet on the road, South Alabama is given nearly a touchdown, which is what the line was for Georgia Southern this past week in Statesboro. So, I don't know, maybe another 17-point loss if that's what we're reading the tea leaves there. It can't be that, though. Like, just straight up, it can't be that. But we're just going to have to see what this team's made of. We're going to see what these coaches are made of as far as how they can get these guys ready on a short week.
Yeah, I don't love this comp, but in looking at these South Alabama scores, they immediately reminded me of that 2015 Panthers team, where it's like you're entering the latter part of the season, your record is bad, objectively bad, but then you look like, yes, obviously there's the 2-touchdown loss to Auburn, makes sense, there's the 2-touchdown loss to North Texas, makes sense, there's a surprise, 18-point loss to Coastal Carolina at home, and then there's a bunch of 1-score losses, in games where you flip a coin a couple times and they come out on top in those games. That's not to suggest specifically that they're a good team. They, as you said, have to win out every single other game on their schedule to go to a bowl game. And it's not going to be an easy task knowing who is still upcoming on their schedule. But that's what it's felt like for the South Alabama team. They don't score a lot. The defense, can hold some teams to under their projections and what they want to do per game. So that is obviously an area of concern since we've not seen Georgia State consistently put points on the board, against an FBS opponent this year. But on the flip side, South Alabama is probably not going to score too much. And this Georgia State defense is allowing everybody to score too much. So this is not necessarily the best feeling game, so I feel like it makes sense why that line is the way that it is, because I don't know that Georgia State has gained any sort of benefit of the doubt here.
No, I mean, you're just basically looking at it and just saying, maybe you get the same performance with Cameron Brown and you win this game. Maybe you finish those drives and the defense gives you a little bit more. Statistically, I think Georgia Southern, not like crazy, I guess maybe like 4 or 5 points a game isn't that small of a difference, but I think they're a better offense than South Alabama has. And look at the Jaguars. It's been Bishop Davenport for the most part, a quarterback. A holdover from last year, but he was playing behind Gio Lopez, who is now gone. Joined the Bill Belichick experience and maybe regretting things there. But he's 66% completion, 9 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, 168 yards a game, so certainly not the strength of their team, but not making a ton of mistakes and accurate when they're throwing it. They're certainly going to look to get the run game going. They've got Kentrell Bullock as their top running back. Again, a guy who came back. 568 yards, 6 touchdowns, works out to about 81 yards a game, and the team is just shy of 200 yards a game at 196.4, 4.5 yards a carry, so you're going to have to be ready for that, and certainly based on the film that they put out there, I think on a short week, Major Applewhite is going to look at that and say, all right, let's just see if Georgia State can stop our run game, and if not, we're just going to keep hammering that button. By the same token, you found something you could put towards in the run game as yourselves. South Alabama's giving up 5 yards a carry, 193.5 yards a game. Some of that because they played the likes of Tulane, who put up 241 on the ground against them, Auburn 195, Troy 217. So no guarantee Georgia State's offense is good enough to match those type of numbers, because those are some good offenses that are able to do that. At least in the case of Auburn, good rushing offenses, or like Jackson Arnold can run the ball, and that's kind of the thing that he actually is able to do in games. If you've been watching their offense not put up that many points in SEC play. So it's kind of like, do you look at this and think Georgia State can do what they've only kind of half shown in like 1.5 games? Or do you trust South Alabama to do something they've done all season, even when they haven't been able to win football games? And so in that regard, it makes a lot of sense that South Alabama are favorites in this one. And the variable we don't know about is who's going to get off the bus ready to play. Because that's kind of what you're looking at, is at this point in the season, at 1-6, the message probably isn't that different for these two coaches. Like, you can't vary your message too much depending on results. You got to have something you're kind of leaning on as your creed. But who's still listening? We'll find out next Thursday in Atlanta.
It sucks that that's like really all as simple as it gets at this point, you know? Like, I'm sure that we could sit here and expand more on it, but just with the trajectory that this season is going. And it sucks also because I don't know that any of the results that we knew this was going to be a tough year. We did. You know, I don't think that we thought it'd be this bad. So that certainly has been a surprise, but it's not like we thought that this was going to be an easy, like, all right, they're just going to be 6-1 and they're going to lose the Ole Miss game and just continue the Vandy success.
This is when we thought that the schedule maybe would start opening up.
Exactly.
Like, we were 1-4 is likely. We didn't really know what App State or Georgia Southern would be. Maybe had flipped as far as which ones we thought would be as good as they are, but like, maybe you call those two more toss-up-y, and then this is where the schedule, quote, gets soft. I mean, doesn't seem like it got that soft. Troy looks pretty good. Marshall is better than expected.
Yeah, exactly. Where's the hole?
I don't know what to make of. But this is where, even now, knowing what we know, the schedule does still look easier because you aren't playing two SEC teams, Memphis, James Madison, all of that. But you know, what evidence is there that this is trending in the direction that they're going to win any of these games? You know, they won the Texas State game last year as heavy underdogs, but there was no indication into that game that you were going to see that. And it was actually, Zach Gibson had been the quarterback and then wasn't, and then Christian Veer comes in and looks as good as he did, and they put up 52 points, and it's like, where has this been? I think that's what we're looking at, is like, maybe you're getting 1 or 2 wins the rest of the way just looking at the schedule, and it's going to be, they could win this one. And it won't be that predictable because going into this game, it's like, on paper, South Alabama should win this because of just what they've been able to do, what Georgia State struggled with. And if Georgia State wins the rest of the way, because I think it'll probably be underdogs in every remaining game, maybe borrowing the Marshall one, if they win this game, maybe it gets them like a slight edge in the Marshall one because it's at home, but it's going to be a case of like, oh, that was a surprise. And they looked good in that game. They won it. Put up a bunch of points. We weren't expecting that. And you're 7 games in to year 2. You're 19 games into this tenure. And I don't need to tell anyone listening that that's not where you want to be. You don't want to be in a place where like it is a surprise every time you play well and every time you win. And look, we didn't make that much of it, I think, last week when the penalties were a lot better, and maybe it's because we didn't think that the problem was necessarily solved, and it wasn't this past game. They tied their season high in the number of penalties, and they set a new record for the amount of penalty yardage against Georgia Southern, and so it's like, that's just part of who this team is, and so that's another reason why you can't really get too far over your skis in praise, because it's just like, fundamentally, this team still struggles, and I didn't have an opportunity yet to kind of go chart it, but I was going back and looking. A couple of them were offsides on kickoffs, which, how does that happen twice in a game? You had some.
You literally line up. You see where the ball is. Like offsides on a kickoff doesn't even make sense as like a a thing. I could understand, there's game flow with like false starting. Like I totally get it. The false start at the goal line, yeah, it sucks, but they were trying to go quickly. That is a false start that I can live with. That false start,
I can't. But I was going to get into those, especially because there were two of them.
Yes, true. When I say I can live with them, I'm saying like that's not to me as boneheaded. It's still boneheaded, but it's not as boneheaded to me as lining up on the wrong side of a kickoff. The ball beats you to lining up. There's no excuse.
You just can't run past the kick.
Yeah.
So I guess we're back to the Georgia Southern recap for a minute, just because it makes sense to talk about it. So it was the two offsides on the kickoffs in the first quarter, and sandwiched in between that on the first kick return, there was a holding to back them up. Didn't cost them because the offense was going gangbusters on the scripted drive, but they had to go like 80-something yards on that first drive because they were backed up because they had a special teams penalty on all three of their first three special teams plays. It's just we're seeing more of the same. I would throw the false. I mean, you're right to say that, and again, I think one of those was, again, one of the young tight ends, I think, who false started. Forget who the other one was, the offensive line, maybe was right tackle. I'd have to go look that up. But those are still like things that, I mean, that was what cost them in the James Madison game. So while I understand your general point, we have seen it be just such a damning part of this offense where they just keep having these pre-snap stuff. So I'm not going to just outright excuse it because it's the most fundamental part of the game, and you're still messing it up, and it made those situations harder. Like, instead of having it,
they had to kick a field goal, I believe,
on the 6-yard line. Well, the holding penalty on Branson Robinson took the touchdown off the board, so that was less procedural, more like just guy held on a pass pro situation. But Ted Hurst goes up and gets that touchdown in the end zone. Incredible play. Probably didn't spend enough time talking about just the back-to-back. Ted Hurst is an amazing football player, plays there, but the reason he was throwing a goal line fade to Ted Hurst in that situation because he got backed up 5 yards. You couldn't just run 4 plays in a row from the 6-inch line. You had to expand the playbook because you got backed up, and so you're just making it harder on yourself there. And inherently, I mean, I'm sure if we wanted to, we could do the digression. I know you're not a lover of the goal line fade yourself. Like, it's a lower success rate play than it is running inside zone. It's like you're inherently putting the ball more at risk throwing the ball in that situation. There's a reason why you want to just be able to lean on your run game right when you're breathing on the goal line. In that situation, they weren't able to because they got backed up. And it's, I guess we're doing the whole. There was one pass interference on Deuce Walker that I'm okay with. It's kind of the same thing James Madison had in reverse, where if he doesn't commit that, it's a touchdown. So you take that 15 yards is like, that's fine. But other than that, it was a lot of the same stuff we've been seeing from this team. And so, especially if you're going into a short week, it's not like you're going to get a ton of practice time. And certainly they're going to go through recovery to get over this game and travel and all that. So you're not going to get a ton of time actually going full speed in practice, cleaning this stuff up. And so it's just going to be about the player-led doing what they can to improve. And I think that's also coloring our thinking on just what is going to happen in this game on Thursday.
Yeah, I want the offense to keep play calling like that. Because if they're going to commit 100-something penalty yards a game, then they're going to have to, throw goal line fades. And, for the most part, they worked. It's, it's not like I thought that the offensive play calling was bad or anything. But, you're exactly right. What are both sides of the ball going to look like this week? Because you don't have a lot of time to prepare. Where this is an opponent where the defense isn't as bad as Georgia Southern's defense is. That's definitely a concern.
And it just speaks to everyone thought that it would be in a different place at this point. Like, I don't think anyone expected a quick turnaround, but I don't think we expected like the existential questions about this program to be happening 1 year, 7 games into the Del McGee era. So I don't know where that leaves us. It's not like I expect the buyout to be paid like we've talked about, but let me just say I have questions about how everyone is going to approach pending off-season decisions, and we can leave it there for the moment. Before we go through Pick'em, not a lot of basketball talk on this one. We're recording this on Sunday. There is game on Friday, exhibition at Morehouse, which as we are recording this, I do not believe I will be able to be in attendance for. So unlike last game, not going to be able to provide the same type of like post-game analysis on it. We will not be back before that game happens, whether it's box score surfing or other methods to just kind of an idea of how that game went. Next time we're on a podcast, next time we're talking about Georgia State sports, at least present date on a podcast, we will cover that as they're getting ready for the run up to the season. Got something non-related to this season we've got teed up. We're excited to hopefully put out next week during the bye. But before we get to that, before we get to the end of the show, we are going to run through our pick'em for this week. So I turn it over to David to end our show this week.
Yeah, last week, straight tie. I will just talk about the surprise result of the week. App State, really? Really? It is so frustrating. I think part of what frustrates me about the Georgia State App State thing is just that you'll have a game where App State will come to Atlanta and they'll return to how they are, and then they'll go back home and then lose to a probably not good Coastal team. I know Coastal's 3-1 in this conference now, but like, come on, man. Everything else I feel like makes sense. Marshall was a surprise. Marshall was a surprise winner of their game with Texas State, but they were also at home, and that's kind of not.
You will be shocked to learn that Texas State had a fourth quarter lead and lost it again.
Shocked.
Ended up losing in double overtime. I mean, it's an issue for this team. I will say, I don't know if you call this like tinfoil or like whatever you want to. People have been circling, power conference, maybe even other group of fives that maybe are going to try and throw some money at a new coach. It's not the worst time to have like, they can't play defense and they can't close out games if you want to hold on to your coach. Like, if Texas State fans are worried about losing Kinney, I feel like they still like him, even if this stuff is perplexing them, and they probably are looking at like, all right, go get a new defensive coordinator and all that. Not the worst time to like still make a bowl in all likelihood, but have people maybe less interested in your head coach. But still, I can't imagine it's a very fun experience. They've lost 3 straight conference games, all of which they had a lead late in the game, all of which they just kind of gave away. And
that's the thing. They're losing the game in the exact same way. It's not like they're just getting out talented. No,
not that we know anything about that.
Yeah, fair. They take these nice leads and then they just still end up losing at the end of the day. I don't want to say it makes no sense because I watch the games. Like, I see that it does make sense, but I just don't know how this could keep happening to them. And then in the definite Sunbelt game of the week,
no, definitely not.
Oh, I was just going to go to the James Madison
I'm saying
one.
The pre-game game of the week ended up not being one at all.
You're right.
It was the first half of the week. The second half, James Madison just put the foot down and just ended it. It was 28-27 at halftime. What was the final? 63-27?
Yes. And it really felt like they left more on the bone there. I had it on just because it was before Georgia State played, and I was curious. It really was an exciting first half, if you could believe it. But after Old Dominion let that James Madison drive at the end of the half result in a touchdown, James Madison just took the sledgehammer back out and it was honestly uncomfortable to watch for a team that I think had some real expectations in Old Dominion, who now are just kind of in an interesting place. Their schedule is not necessarily the easiest these next couple of weeks, so then they lost a pretty important tiebreaker right there and generally looked pretty bad doing it. So
getting ahead of a spoiling this week, we both have them beating App State at home, but I am monitoring the situation there as far as like they could like come out and just no-show this one, and it's like, oh, okay, so this is how the rest of the season's going to go for them, and concerns about their future under Ricky Ronnie, when I think a lot of them felt, especially with the way the season started, this was going to be their year to really do something. I don't even really want to liken it to Sean Elliott. I did so in like a group chat yesterday, but I don't love the comparison because, frankly, Sean Elliott had more success than Ricky Ronnie has to this point, but feels like the same kind of glass-breaking moment that maybe Georgia State fans had 2023 on that losing streak where it's like, this team's never going to get to that point under this head coach. Yesterday's loss, when they were right there, when it was, I think they were like a 1.5 point underdog entering the game. Like, it was a perceived toss-up at James Madison, and you just totally spit out the bit in the second half. Feels like the point of no return as far as believing in Coach Ronnie there. And so we'll see what the team does this week as they head back home, host App State, who is also coming off a perplexing loss. So I guess lots to monitor about, like, which coaches can get their guys ready to play this week. Talked about Georgia State and South Alabama as part of that as well. Texas State is going to James Madison next Tuesday, and it's kind of like a reverse there of, like, how does Bob Chesney get them back down from the highs of that win against ODU, and how does G.J. Kinney get the guys right after an 0-3 start to conference play? So kind of not the same story there, but going to tell a lot about those coaches' approaches to those moments. After all we've said, looks like we both ended up picking Georgia State against South Alabama. I will say that it's the same criteria I laid out, that there's not a reason I'm necessarily predicting it. It's just I think this could be, of the ones left on the schedule, the one that they win against expectations. And maybe Cam Brown goes crazy and the team drops 42 points and it's not a replicable performance, but this is the week where it comes together for the offense. It's kind of all I got.
That was the best collection of three quarters the offense has had in a while. So, I think if the defense doesn't drop a actual goose egg in the fourth quarter last week, I think we're talking about some optimism with the offense, and I would love nothing more that it actually is taken into the next week, because I do think that there are some things that they could repeat about the Georgia Southern game, and that's why I did pick them in this game, because of the short week as well. I think if it was a full week, might not have had them. It's also just tough to travel on the road on a short week, so.
Yeah, and then, as I teased, we both picked ODU to beat App State. But I could be wrong there. It's kind of the same thing where, like, I picked Texas State to beat Troy, but I was like, I don't know. Exact same feelings here, but I'm going to stick to my guns just because I think ODU is the better team. We'll see how they approach it.
If App is the App that they keep trying to say that they are this year, they should comfortably win this game. I don't know that I still don't know that I see the App that people think is there, but it would be a surprise to me if Old Dominion drops this, but they could, because everything you said about their head coach and where they've been the last couple of years.
We're back both off of ULM. Southern Miss beats ULM in our eyes. I mean, Southern Miss still feels like, that Southern Miss Troy, the Watkins Bowl, I'm saying, going to be huge for the Sun Belt West.
Last week of the season,
exactly
too.
What we had on our bingo card. This is those two teams kind of controlling the fate in the Sun Belt West in preseason. We're split on Arkansas State hosting Georgia Southern. I backed the Red Wolves at home. I guess kind of the same principles that you were laying out for South Alabama not winning at Georgia State. We'll see how much of what Georgia State's defense played a role in Georgia Southern's offense, and Georgia State's shortcomings helping the defense down the stretch for Georgia Southern. So I don't love this Arkansas State team either, but I'm just giving it a slight edge. We're both with Troy over Louisiana. And then, so JMU set up now. Like, they beat ODU, they got the tiebreaker. They still only got the one loss to Louisville, so, like, if they run the table, they really could be in the group of five, depending on if the AC, like, cannibalizes itself. I just don't think this year is that for the Sun Belt. I've got Texas State winning this one at home. I think they could score a lot of points, and James Madison's offense certainly looked a lot better against Old Dominion than it had at that point in the season. But Texas State needs this one. It's at home, and it just feels like the Sun Belt's not going to find any joy this year. And like this is like right when it feels like someone's emerging, they go on the road and they lose, and okay, they're a 2-loss team now, and probably G5 playoff stuff isn't happening this year again.
James Madison's point total allowed high is 28. That was a mouthful. I apologize. They gave up 28 points to Louisville. That was their season high in points allowed. There we go. They gave up 27 yesterday to Old Dominion. And to me, it's about the defense. I think the defense is just kind of mowing people down right now. Louisville had to earn all 28 of those points too, if not for some dumb James Madison offensive decisions. I don't think that Louisville would have been able to get that because it really did look like James Madison made them earn it.
Yeah, well, 7 of them was on a defensive touchdown. So
exactly.
JMU defense didn't even give up all 28 of them.
Exactly. I know that Texas State can probably score. I just feel like James Madison is, they're going to finally get their Sun Belt title achieved this year. So right now, I don't think anybody is going to slow them down with how they're looking.
I mean, I guess we both, with picking Georgia State to win, that would be a result people aren't expecting. But I'm also looking for that. Like, I'm looking for this week's Coastal Carolina goes to Boone and wins. Like, I just think Texas State beating JMU kind of fits that bill of, like, there's been perplexing results basically every week in conference play this year. And so I'd be silly not to, like, seek that one out. Because, like, it's going to happen. Nothing has gone to convention. There's not a single fully trustable Sun Belt team. James Madison is almost there, but they're not there yet. A game like this could go a long way to being like, all right, put all your chips behind the Dukes. But I think they've still got the one more test that awaits them to get to that point.
That's true, and this is last week was their first like actual blowout in a good while. So I knew they blew out Georgia Southern, but some surprising teams kind of held them at bay in the 2 weeks prior than Old Dominion. So I do get it.
One such surprising team we may talk about a lot in this podcast.
Yes, I do get the thought here. I do.
So, as I mentioned, not a lot of basketball talk. We'll hit that our next main pod. I guess with the Thursday game, we still haven't really fully worked out our post-game show schedule and all that type of stuff, but you will certainly hear from us after that game. And whatever else is coming up on the docket, basketball proper is right around the corner. And like I mentioned, got something we're looking forward to coming out next week. Before that, for now, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Thursday Night Podcast. From me and David, thank you for listening, as always, and we will catch you next time.